For over a century, the global hotel industry was an untouchable, multi-billion-dollar fortress. Multinational titans like Hilton, Marriott, and Sheraton owned the physical world, constructing massive concrete empires across every major city on Earth. Their dominance was completely unquestioned, but in 2007, inside a tiny cramped apartment in San Francisco, two completely broke roommates made a desperate choice. They inflated 3 cheap air mattresses and put them on a makeshift website. Today, that ridiculous idea is a tech giant worth more than the 5 largest hotel chains on the planet combined. Two completely broke tech outcasts systematically dismantled a century-old property empire. If you had pitched this business model to any elite Wall Street consultant back in 2007, they would have called you dangerously insane. The entire concept went completely against the most basic instincts of human survival. Pay money to sleep on a stranger's floor while they are actively inside the house? Let a total random stranger unlock your front door and sleep in your bed? It sounded like the perfect script for a horror movie, not a multi-billion-dollar startup. Airbnb's true genius wasn't inventing a new type of real estate. They did something far more complex. They successfully managed to monetize human trust. The entire empire was born out of complete economic desperation. Brian Chesky and Gebbia were 2 unemployed design graduates who couldn't even afford to pay their basic monthly rent. Their landlord had just jacked up their pricing by 25%, and their bank accounts were rapidly hitting absolute zero. But then, they noticed a massive operational glitch in the local economy. A massive international design conference was coming to San Francisco, and every single hotel room in the city was completely sold out. Thousands of wealthy travelers desperately needed a place to stay, and the roommates had empty floor space. Over a single frantic weekend, they coded a primitive basic website called Air Bed and Breakfast. The premise was simple: an air mattress on the floor, a workspace, and a home-cooked breakfast in the morning for $80 a night. To their absolute amazement, 3 guests actually booked the floor space. They weren't sketchy drifters. They were successful professionals looking for a unique networking experience. The roommates didn't just pay their rent that month. They discovered a massive psychological gold mine. Travelers didn't want cold, sterile, identical hotel rooms. They wanted authentic local connection. But turning that small, quirky experiment into an actual scalable business was an absolute nightmare. The venture capital elite in Silicon Valley completely despised the idea. They viewed it as a liability nightmare and a total niche joke. Famous startup accelerator investor Paul Graham flatly rejected them at first, famously asking the founders, "Is something fundamentally wrong with these people? Why would anyone choose to do this?" The roommates pitched to 20 different angel investors. 15 ignored their emails entirely, and 5 gave them cold, condescending rejections. They were entirely dead in the water. By 2008, the company was drowning in massive credit card debt, completely maxing out multiple accounts just to keep their servers online. To survive, the founders had to pivot from tech engineering to literal breakfast manufacturing. The 2008 US presidential election was heating up. So they bought bulk quantities of generic cereal, designed custom political boxes called Obama O's and Captain McCain, and hand-assembled them in their kitchen. They sold them as limited edition collector items for $40 a box, miraculously generating $30,000 in emergency funding. Selling cereal literally saved the hotel killer from death. Paul Graham was so incredibly impressed by their raw, cockroach-like survival instinct that he finally admitted them into Y Combinator, But despite the elite backing, their user traction was completely flatlining. They were making barely $200 a week. Chesky decided to fly directly to New York City to investigate the platform's listings himself. He uncovered a catastrophic structural flaw in their user interface. The hosts were taking terrible, blurry, dark photos of their rooms using old flip phones. The properties looked incredibly sketchy, completely triggering the consumer's instinctual fear of danger. The founders executed a brilliant, boots-on-the-ground operational hack. They rented a high-end professional camera, knocked on the doors of every single Airbnb host in New York City, and took gorgeous professional interior photos of the apartments for absolute free. They adjusted the lighting, curated the furniture layouts, and made ordinary apartments look like luxury boutique hotels. The mathematical results were instantaneous. The moment the professional photos went live on the interface, booking revenues across New York City immediately tripled. Airbnb had successfully managed to hack the visual psychology of trust. To scale this visual trust globally, Airbnb engineered a hyper-sophisticated digital trust architecture. They moved completely away from anonymous classified ads and built a mandatory, peer-reviewed social ecosystem. They introduced a symmetrical 5-star rating matrix where hosts and guests were forced to publicly review each other after checkout. If a guest trashed a room, they were banned from the platform. If a host lied about cleanliness, their listing vanished. By tying digital identities to real-world reputations, Airbnb successfully erased the psychological fear of the stranger, making intimacy safe for global commerce. Once the trust matrix was locked in, Airbnb unleashed the ultimate, most devastating economic weapon against traditional hotels: the asset-light model. If a massive global hotel brand like Hilton wants to expand and add 10,000 new rooms to its catalog, it has to buy incredibly expensive urban land, secure zoning permits, spend 3 years pouring concrete, and hire massive custodial staffs. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars. Airbnb can comfortably add 10,000 new rooms to its inventory in a single night without spending a single penny on brick and mortar. The world became their unpaid hotel developers. Airbnb timed the market flawlessly, capitalizing perfectly on a massive generational shift in consumer behavior. The rising millennial demographic completely despised the corporate artificial luxury of traditional hotel chains. They viewed the matching floral bed sheets and generic lobbies as completely boring and fake. Airbnb sold them an authentic lifestyle illusion. You weren't just a tourist visiting Paris. You were living in a real Parisian artist's loft. By transforming ordinary residential living spaces into high-end consumer products, Airbnb completely hijacked the youth travel and business professional markets, stealing billions in pure revenue. By the mid-2010s, the traditional hotel lobby fell into a state of absolute, unmitigated panic. Airbnb wasn't just a quirky tech trend anymore. It was an existential economic threat that was directly cannibalizing their core weekend and holiday revenues. Hotel trade groups launched massive, aggressive public relations smear campaigns, labeling Airbnb as a dangerous, unregulated black market that was actively destroying local neighborhoods and driving up rental prices for residents. The hotel industry weaponized its immense political leverage, launching full-scale lobbying wars in major global capitals to regulate the startup out of existence. The geopolitical backlash was brutal. Cities like New York, Paris, Barcelona, and Berlin passed strict, aggressive zoning laws and heavy legal bans, heavily limiting or completely outlawing short-term rentals to protect their local housing markets from getting devoured by commercial hosts. Airbnb found itself trapped in a non-stop, multi-front war against municipal governments. They had to construct an army of corporate lawyers and public policy advisors, spending hundreds of millions of dollars fighting court battles in every single territory they entered. The scrappy design startup had officially become a controversial geopolitical superpower. As Airbnb grew into a massive public corporation, the exact same platform that disrupted hotels began to face a severe internal rot, the paradox of success. The platform became completely flooded by corporate property management firms and predatory real estate investors who purchased entire apartment blocks just to turn them into permanent illegal mini hotels. The authentic local experience was completely replaced by identical, cheap furniture, hidden surveillance cameras, and highly infuriating checkout chore lists. Guests were paying premium prices plus massive cleaning fees, only to be forced to take out the trash and wash the sheets themselves. In 2020, the company faced its ultimate near-death experience. The global pandemic hit, international borders slammed shut, and 90% of Airbnb's global bookings evaporated in a matter of weeks. The business model looked completely doomed. But while massive hotel chains were crushed under the weight of billions in fixed property debt and empty real estate maintenance costs, Airbnb's asset-light agility saved them once again. Millions of remote workers abandoned cities to book long-term rural stays in the countryside. Airbnb didn't just survive the apocalypse. They went public later that year at a staggering $100 billion valuation. Today, Airbnb stands as the absolute, undisputed king of global hospitality. They don't just compete with hotels, they have permanently rewired how humanity experiences travel, housing, and urban geography. The platform hosts over 7 million active listings across nearly every single country on Earth. The traditional hotel chains were forced to radically adapt, acquiring boutique properties and creating their own home rental platforms just to slow the bleeding. But the market trajectory remains completely clear. The empire built on 3 cheap air mattresses now dictates the rules of global tourism. The spectacular rise of Airbnb remains the ultimate case study on the absolute supremacy of digital platforms over physical assets. It perfectly illustrates the paradox of the platform. In the 21st century, the most powerful real estate corporation owns 0 land. The most powerful transportation company owns 0 vehicles. True business dominance belongs entirely to the architect who successfully builds the digital trust infrastructure, captures the collective attention of the consumer market, and transforms an underutilized community asset into a frictionless financial network. The platform rules the world. The incredible saga of Airbnb is the ultimate masterclass and warning for every entrepreneur on Earth. It proves that no industry monopoly is ever too massive or historic to fail. True innovation isn't about outspending your multi-billion-dollar competitors on physical assets. It's about possessing the radical design vision to solve a deep behavioral problem, like human deconfianza. If you can successfully bridge the psychological gap between strangers, you can construct an empire out of thin air. In business, the rules can change in a single weekend. Adapt or perish. The choice is always yours. They started out completely broke selling custom cereal boxes just to pay the rent, only to build the most dominant real estate platform in human history. Subscribe for more business stories.